Okay, so this is a little add-on video to what I just recorded. I was just starting to talk about the characteristics of this RL50 powder, and my time started running short, and I got tied up in talking about this UHMW stuff here, which is basically stock tape, slickum tape, and how to buy it in bulk if you're going to play around with prototyping big guns that burn up a lot. I mean, I used a chunk of this tape like this long just for the fore end when I widened it out on this gun. But where I was going was I was talking about how I a lot of times leave powder in my measures, and it's hygroscopic, means it takes in water, which means it changes the burn rate, and I've never found that to happen enough to make any difference, so I leave powder all the time. But one of the characteristics, this powder has been very consistent. I'm almost out of this, so I might switch to something else. Like I'm thinking about trying 50 BMG, but I've got to get these 4 guns shooting into raggedy chicken-shaped holes before I get too crazy about worrying about. I've got 3 different kinds of primers. I just got in a bunch of RWS brass, so I've got 3 different kinds of brass cases now. I got 10 different kinds of bullets. I got all kinds of places to go, but so far I've only gotten 2 guns to shoot to a point where they're worth dealing with. My screen door at low velocity shoots okay, but I have to ride it, and that hurts some, but it can be done. And I can get it to shoot 3/4 minute groups, I suppose, at low velocity. But the extreme spread is really bad. That's not acceptable. So that's a set aside and wait for later thing. Then I broke my good gun. So I went over and worked the bugs out of my 5-piece billet, which when I ended up there, I got it down to where it was shooting something ready and tunable. But I haven't even tried another bullet in it. I did all that before I found out the inadequacies of the AMAX bullet. So I got my best gun up and running, got the brake on it, got her all locked down, feeling good about it, and I ran into problems, I think, with the scope. So I'm not sure. But the characteristics of this powder are such that it's been very consistent, climbs up very mechanically. I've run it from 201 grains to 247 grains. And then I ran some well over 250 up where I don't even want to talk about when I proof tested a gun I thought was going to blow up. Or I had to prove wasn't going to blow up. I ran it all the way up to where it was wrecking brass in one firing. I ran it up to bench rest velocities. I ran it up to, I dare say, 80,000 pounds. I ran it up to almost 2,900 feet per second with a 750 grain bullet in a 24-inch barrel, which is unheard of. And the powder responded well all the way through, but I came over, I keep my powder, my loose powder, I always keep a bunch of loose powder, and in this case I'm using the lid of the RCBS Chargemaster to my left here. I keep loose powder on here to pick it up. I don't mind handling the powder. My hands are dry, clean, and might have a little wax on them, but I wait to the kernel. And this powder, and I'll say just tonight, I switched over to some Lake City brass because I had some bullets that didn't want to fit in the brass that I happened to be using, which was super expensive RWS brass, but the necks were a little bit too thick on it. So long story short, I switched over, and my ES, I ran 6 groups, and my ES was between 10 and 12 feet per second. One of them was 16. But when I was loading the cartridge case, I might have spilled some. One of them came in a little bit low. So this powder, which is Reloader 50, boom, has been very good to work with, and I'll work with more. I've got a couple more 8-pounders of it. But I walked over to this. As I said, I've taken 3 or 4 days away. I've been working, and I came over to this, and it had a discolored area on top. It wasn't red, the classic stinky powder degradation. It wasn't gray, it wasn't brown. It was just an odd color, and I looked in the top of the powder measure and it also had that discoloration, and that is, absolutely is powder degradation. Left to its own devices, this powder would have gone bad within a month or two. And I'm just throwing that out there. I hadn't loaded anything for about 5 days, 6 days it sat there, but no more than that. And it started to discolor on top. And it started to discolor on top, and I stirred it a little bit, and I could still see the color on the individual grains. So the grains were starting to degrade, and I stirred it back in. I have now since shot that powder. I used it, ran a whole powder measure through, actually probably 2 in the last couple of days. And it shot just fine. It wasn't degraded to the point where it hurt anything. My extreme spread has stayed down well under 20. There hasn't been any weirdness, there hasn't been any changes, there hasn't been anything. It's worked out fine. So all I'm saying is that's one thing I found about that RL50. I think that's what that stuff is called. Let me make sure, because people will be watching this. Alliant powder reloader 50 may be prone to degrading more quickly than some other powders. So I just figured I'd throw that on. I forgot, I got sidetracked. I'm really excited about this, finding this UHMW stock tape in bulk. And I got a little waylaid by that, and I forgot to talk to you about the fact that this powder is, keep an eye on it. I've got a thrower right here, for instance. This is funny, it's kind of like old gas versus new gas and the concept of leaving gas. This is something I call my kitty load right here. If I turned that, you can actually just see the end of, this says kitty load on it. You can see it coming around. This powder's been in here for years, and it's not degraded. I can go load right now, tomorrow, hammer down. So, just wanted to mention the fact that I may have found a tendency of this stuff. Nothing is established, don't take my word for it, but I may have found a tendency for RL50 to have a shorter shelf life when left out. So, all I do here is pass on stuff I find out, so that's what I'm passing on today. Thanks.